Hello friends, today we are going to see what cloud functions are, how to work with them, and we will have some hands-on demos, and we will learn how to develop cloud functions, how to deploy them on Google Cloud. So we will go through all kinds of stuff. So let's start by just summarizing some of the theoretical stuff and see what the cloud functions are. So Cloud Functions is part of the serverless offerings on Google Cloud Platform. It is called Functions as a Service offering because you don't really have to deal with the infrastructure here. All you do is you deploy your function or your code to Google Cloud Function, and Google will take care of provisioning the underlying infrastructure, will figure out how to run it. You do not need to provision any virtual machine, you do not need to provision any storage or anything like that. All that will be taken care by Google Cloud. All you do is you just provide them with your code or function, call that microservice as well, if you want to. But from the infrastructure point of view, you don't have to worry about anything. Everything will be taken care by Google Cloud. So no provisioning of servers, no managing them, no upgrading the infrastructure or the operating system, patching it, nothing like that, right? So that is awesome. Also, cloud functions scale automatically. However, you can control how much you want to scale. Once you specify how much you want to scale, Google Cloud will take care of scaling your functions whenever there is a need to scale. You only pay for the amount of time your function runs. So for example, if you have a function that runs once a day for a minute, and if you have this function running every day for a month, let's say for 30 days, then you will be charged for 30 minutes because your function only ran 1 minute a day. So you only get billed for the 30 minutes. You do not get billed for 720 hours, unlike virtual machine. You only get billed when your function is running or is getting executed. There are two types of functions, HTTP functions and background functions. HTTP functions are triggered by a URL. Background functions are triggered by an event, a pub/sub event, or a storage event. So we will look into all those things in our demos. So let's see what do we have in terms of demo. What are we going to look at? So we will start by deploying a very simple cloud function. We will deploy it from the GCP console, and that's where we will spend some time, just get the feel of it. Then we will set up our local machine to develop cloud functions, to test them, because you do not want to just deploy your cloud function every time to Google Cloud and then test it there, right? You do not want to test in the cloud because then it's going to cost you money. You want to test it on your local machine, verify it all works, and then you do the deployment, right? We will work with HTTP functions. We will work with background functions. We will trigger the background functions using a pub/sub message or cloud storage event. We will also understand how to access Mysql database. We will create a Mysql database in Cloud SQL, and we will access it. We will also understand how to access secret manager, right? And then we will understand how to deal with CORS. So CORS is when you are trying to invoke your function from a website, HTTP function from a website, and because they are on different domains, you will have CORS errors. So how to mitigate those errors? There are Google documentations around it, so there is not much in there, but we will understand what to look for, how to work with it, and all those sort of things. And along the way, we will look at how the logging works, how the monitoring works, where to go and look at the logs, where to go and see the monitoring, all those kind of things. So let's get some hands-on work going, and I will see you in the GCP console now. Okay, so the very first thing we want to do is we want to create a brand new project. We have to do it from the scratch. We are going to do it from the scratch so that we can, you know, see how the whole thing works, right? So the first thing we want to do is we want to create a new project. For that, I will go here and I will click on new project. I'm going to name this as GCP Cloud Functions Demo 1, and I will click on create. Okay, now the project is created, so I'm going to select the project. Okay, project is created. We selected the project. We will be working in the GCP Cloud Functions Demo 1 project. So the next thing we want to do is, let's see what we have to do for our first demo. So the first demo is we are going to see how to work with cloud functions from the console, right? Very simple, right? So the first thing we want to do is we want to enable a couple of APIs. These are the two APIs that we want to enable. First one is Cloud Functions API. So I will copy that and I will come here and I will click on APIs and services. Click on enable APIs and services. I'm gonna put Cloud Functions API in there and I will select this and click on enable. Okay, next we want to enable one more API. So the next API that we want to enable is Cloud Build API, and we put it in here, Cloud Build API, and we click on enable. Okay, with the APIs enabled, let's go back to our home page and let's create our first cloud function. Okay, in order to create the cloud function, we will go to Cloud Functions. So we'll just type in here Cloud Functions and we'll click on it. And because we don't have any functions deployed right now, it will just prompt us to create a new function, and we will click on the create function. Now let's see what options do we have here. Now if you remember, I talked about generations. I probably did not, but there are multiple generations of cloud functions, Gen 1 and Gen 2. Gen 2 is in preview. Gen 2 has mostly to do with, you know, the quotas and the limitations that applied to Gen 1. So they just, you know, added more quota, added more functions, or added more services that can, you know, trigger cloud function, all those sort of things. First gen functions are still valid, second gen functions are still valid. We will just deal with, you know, first gen functions, right? So this is the first gen function. Function name, we can give it anything. We are going to leave it as is. Region, you want to choose the region which is closest to you. For me, it's US East 4, so I will select that. Now here is where we need to figure out what type of trigger our function will be invoked with. Either it's gonna be HTTP, PubSub, storage, Firestore. HTTP trigger is when it will actually give you a URL, and we can take that URL, paste it in the browser, and boom, we can see the function gets executed. PubSub, storage, Firestore, these you can call them, you know, as background functions. They will not be triggered by a URL, but they will actually be triggered by an event. So for PubSub, if you push a message to your PubSub topic, it will trigger the function. For storage, if you set up a trigger to invoke your cloud function every time an object or a file is added or deleted or changed, or something else is changed, or any sort of trigger that you want to specify to invoke this cloud function, you can specify that. Same thing goes with the Firestore, and there are some more triggers which are in preview, but mostly we will be working with PubSub and storage triggers in the upcoming demos. But for now we will just leave the trigger type to HTTP, and this will be the URL for our function. We don't need to note down the URL, right? How do we want to allow the invocation? Do we want to allow the invocation by requiring authentication, or unauthenticated invocations are okay? Because this is our very first demo, we will just say no authentication. Anybody who has this URL, who goes to this URL, should be able to see our should be able to execute the function and get the return. Do you want to require HTTPS? No, for demo not really, right? So we just click on save, and let's see what other options do we have here. So this is where we can set up how much memory do we want to allocate for our function. So there are tons of options. We can select whichever we want. We will leave it to the default 256 MB. Timeout. What is the timeout? Timeout is in, if my function gets started, if my function execution gets started, how long before the function gets terminated, right? So let's say you want to execute a function and you're doing some heavy processing in that function, and it's gonna take you more than 540 seconds because that's the limit. If it's gonna take you more than 540 seconds, as in 9 minutes, the function itself will just terminate itself. It will not go beyond 9 minutes in the execution. You can execute it 9 times, it's fine. You can execute this 100 times, it's fine. But any execution that you do, it cannot exceed 9 minutes. After 9 minutes, the function will just die. It will not care if you are in the middle of the processing, it will just die. Then we can specify a service account. We will look into it a little more in detail in the upcoming demos. Now this is where we can specify scaling, right? How much do we want to scale this function? So if somebody, let's say we are doing some processing in the function, and it takes about, let's say, 5 minutes to do the processing, right? If there are multiple people, or if there are multiple requests coming to our function while the function is already getting executed, do we want those requests to wait or fail, or do we want to kick another function and just return the response? What do we want to do? That's how the scaling works, right? So we can specify how do we want to scale, right? Be careful with this, because if you mess this up and if you set up the scaling too high, you may end up getting ton of charges if somebody just does some kind of DDoS sort of an attack. So you want to balance this out, right? So that you don't end up incurring ton of charges. Also, you don't want this to impact your end users, right? So you have to balance it out. For the demo, we are gonna say the minimum number of instances is 0 and maximum number of instances is 1, right? We do not want any instance to be running all the time. We want this service to completely shut down if nobody's accessing it, right? For the build, we can specify worker pulls and all those sort of things. We do not have those things right now. We do not care. Because this is our very first demo, let's keep it simple, right? Same thing, connections, we are gonna say allow all traffic. Means anybody who can reach the URL, that is this one, should be able to receive the response. There is another option which says allow internal traffic only. This is when we have background functions, like if we want the function to be triggered only by PubSub, or cloud storage, or maybe Firestore events, then we will say that allow internal only. Then there is another setting which says allow internal as well as traffic from the load balancing. So if we have a function that we want to invoke by the URL, also we want it to invoke, using pub subtopics, right? So if that is the case, then we have to set up a load balancer in front of our cloud function URL, and we can make that function respond to the HTTP requests, as well as we can make it respond to the events. So we can have that kind of setting as well. And for the VPC and everything, we are just gonna leave everything right now as is. Security, for now we are just gonna leave this one as is. We are gonna see how to work with the secrets and everything in the upcoming demos. So we are gonna leave this one as is, and we will click on next. What is your runtime environment, right? So here you get tons of options: .NET Core, Go, Java, Node.js, PHP, Python, Ruby, right? We are gonna use Python, and when you say Python, it just gives you default hello world application, right? Your entry point, this is your function name, right? Your function name is your entry point. For Python, the requirement is to have the file name is main.py, and then there is another file called requirement.txt. So requirements.txt is where you are going to specify all third-party packages that you want to install, that your function requires. This function does not require any third-party dependencies or packages, so requirements.txt is empty. Our main.py, our code is very simple. All we are gonna do is just return hello world when somebody makes a request to our URL, and if they pass a message parameter, then we will return the message parameter. Otherwise we will just say hello world, right? And then we click on deploy. Now it's gonna take a little bit of time for the function to get deployed, so let's just wait for it. Okay, so our function is deployed and is ready to be consumed. So we click on the function name, and we can see all sort of things here, right? This is where we can do some monitoring, execution time, memory utilization, how many instances of the function are running right now. We can see all those things, right? So these are basic metrics. These are our basic metrics, right? Second tab is details. This is where we get more information about the function, right? So all these things we already specified at the time of creating the function, and those are just the same things here. We can see the source, what our source code looks like. Variables, we will get to them, not right now, but there are runtime environment variables, there are secrets, they will all show up here if we specify. Trigger, remember we created this as HTTP trigger, and we said do not require HTTPS, right? So this is the URL. Permissions, don't worry about it right now. Logs, they will be empty. I mean, they will not be empty, they will be telling you that function has been deployed and all sort of things, right? So that is good here. Testing, this is where we can actually test our function, right? So if we just click on test the function, you can see that it will print hello world, because we said if there is no JSON, there is no message key in the JSON that we pass, then just return hello world. Otherwise return the message. So if we do message custom, right, this is valid JSON. Right. Now that we are passing a custom here, and we are gonna say custom message, and we click on test function, you can see the output is custom message, and you can see some logs will show up in a couple of seconds, right? So nothing fancy here, very simple, right? So now let's go back to the trigger, and let's grab this URL and open it in the new tab, and you can see we got the hello world, right? And in case if you want to pass a parameter here, message equal what, and you can say that it is actually returning us what, right? So that is our very basic first Cloud Run function. You can see it is not at all complicated to get started with. So we are gonna end the first demo here, and then we are gonna now go and see what our second demo is we are gonna do in our second demo. Okay, in our next demo 2, we are going to see how do we set up our local system so we can develop our cloud functions on our local machine, and then deploy them, and then we will test it. We will test the functions, make sure everything works fine, and then we will deploy those functions to GCP Console. So we are going to prepare our machine, install required things, so that in the upcoming demos we can start writing the code. So for that, this is what we need. I will get to the functions framework in a bit, but before we do that, make sure that we have Python installed. For the IDE, we will be using Visual Studio Code. There is also a REST client that we will install. That's an extension. This is in order to make the HTTP requests from our Visual Studio Code itself. Next, we will have Docker should be installed. In order to install the Docker, you can just use brew, or you can follow this particular Stack Overflow question and the answer, and you will be able to find out how to install Docker. Then we will install Google Cloud SDK. Again, the command is right here, and then we will install Pack. Again, the command is right here. If you want to learn more about Pack, you can go to this URL and read about it. And why do we need Docker and Pack? This is because we will be using something called functions framework. So let's see what functions framework is. So I'll copy the URL and we will go there. So functions framework is provided by Google Cloud. It's open source framework, and according to Google, it is used by Google in production environment. The benefit of using functions framework is we can write the function the way we write it, but it allows us to test the function on our local system. Also, it allows us to see how the function will behave if we deploy it or run it in multiple other environments. Like if we deploy it as a cloud function, how will it behave? If we deploy it as a cloud run service, how it will behave? If we deploy it to Kubernetes or Knative based environments, how will it behave? So we can test all those scenarios here, and instead of writing multiple times multiple codes, we can just use this particular framework, and it will help us design our system. This framework is available for multiple languages: Node.js, Go, Java, PHP, Python, Ruby, and .NET. We will be working with the Python clients or Python framework, and here is the documentation for Python libraries. It's pretty easy to work with, doesn't require a ton of setup or anything. As long as you have Docker and Pack and all those things installed, it will be a breeze for you to just work with this. So now that we have all these things installed, we don't really need to install functions framework because it's a library. It will be part of our Python project, but rest of the things you can install using this guide here. So now in the next demo, we will actually start with creating our first real function, and we will deploy it. We will test it on the local machine, and then we will deploy it on GCP, everything from the command line. So let's get to it. Okay, so now we will do our first real demo and see how do we deploy something from our local machine to GCP functions, right? So let's see what we are going to do. So we have this very simple code which is not doing much. It's more or less, it accepts an argument called name. So if you provide the name, it will say hello whatever name, and if you do not provide the name in the argument, then it will just return you stranger, saying hello stranger, right? Very simple. We have created this file here where we are going to so that we can send the requests from our Visual Studio Code, and this is our deployment steps. So we are in the directory demo3, and we are in the directory here called demo3, and there is nothing that we need to worry because we are not using Cloud Functions framework yet. We will do that in the next demo. So this is just to show you how do you deploy something from your local system, right? So these are the deployment steps. We will cd to the demo3. We are already here. Next thing we will do is gcloud auth login. This will prompt you to log in using your Gmail credentials. So we will do that, and it will ask you for the username and password and everything, and you just go through the process, and you will get this web page which will say you are now authenticated. So we are all good. Next thing we will do is we will list out all the projects that we have in our GCP, and it will return you all the projects, right? What we need to do is we need to find the project ID, which is the first column here, right? So make sure you grab that particular project ID, copy that, and you paste it in the fourth command. So the fourth command is the one which will set that project as active, and we'll copy that and paste it here. Now we are gonna be working in this project. So if we deploy anything, if we create something, everything will be created in our project, right? So the first thing we want to do is we want to create a service account. When you deploy Cloud Function, there is an option where you can specify your own service account or let Google use default service account. We do not want to work with the default service account. We want to start with very basic, right? Least privilege. We have to remember least privilege. If a service account does not need access to do something, it should not have access to do something. So for that, we will create our own service account. This service account, you can either do it from the console. You can just go to I am an admin, go to service accounts and click on create service account. You can do it from here, or we can do it from the command line. So we will be doing it from the command line. So you can see right now I have this default service account. So if I do not specify a service account, then this is the default service account it will be using, but we will be specifying our own service account. So we will create one. So let's go and create one service account. So for that, to create a service account, here is the link. So here is the command that you can do, and okay, so let's copy this command which will create the service account. The name of the service account will be Cloud Functions Demo Service Account, and we will paste it here. Let's see what happens. It failed. Why did it fail? Let's try it one more time. Copy, paste it. The lowercase. Name must be between 6 and 30 characters. Okay. So instead of service account, we'll just call it asset. That should do. Copy, paste it, run it. Okay, so now our service account is created. Let's go here and refresh that and verify that. So that limitation of 30 characters for the service account name does not apply if you create it from here on the console, right? So that is something I learned. Good, no worries. So anyways, we have our service account created. Let's go and deploy our cloud function. Make sure we change this service account name here. So let's look at this command. So we are going to say gcloud-functions deploy demo3. Entry point is hello, because inside our main.py this is the function name hello, and runtime is 3.9 Python. Source is the current directory where I'm here. Region is US East 1. Trigger is HTTP. Unauthenticated, allow unauthenticated, and the service account name. Okay, so this all looks good. Make sure you are in the directory, because if you are not, then this command will fail, right? Because it expects you to specify the source here, and because we are in demo3, it will use that as a source. It will figure out because file name that we have is main.py, and that's what the file name is supposed to be. So let's copy this and paste it here and see what happens. Now remember, our service account has no access to do anything. It's empty. It does not have access to do anything. It has zero permissions. You can see service account has no access. So let's go to cloud functions. And it's still deploying, so we will wait. And it's deployed, so let's go to demo3, and we can see that in the details, this is our service account that we just created, and that's the service account we have associated with this cloud function. Source, you can see the same source that we had. No variables. Trigger, HTTP, permissions, and everything else is there, right? So we can either click on this and see hello stranger, or we can actually copy this URL and come back to our Visual Studio Code, and we can paste it in here. And we will replace it everywhere. And let's exit. Okay, so after replacing the URL for all three, let's run each of these commands one by one. So we will right click and we will say send request, and you can see hello stranger. That's the first one. The reason we are able to do this is because we have installed this REST client extension. So if you come here and you just search for REST client, and because I have already installed it, so it's asking me to uninstall or disable, but you get the idea. That's the extension that we have installed. That's why we are able to just select the request and right click and say send request. So the next one, we are saying hello, and then we are passing a name as Jim, so you can see hello Jim. And third one, we are making a post request and we are passing the name as Jason, name Joyce, and we will right click and we'll say send request, and you can say hello Joyce, right? So you can see that our first demo was good, and we were able to deploy the function from the command line. We created a service account and we associated that service account to our function, and that's how we were able to deploy this. So we will, in the next demo, we will start working with functions framework. So I'll see you out there. Okay, so in our next demo, or this demo, we are going to see how to work with functions framework and how to test the function locally and make sure everything is gonna work and then deploy it. So for that, let's go back to our cloud functions. Make sure the functions are only 2 functions here, right? So demo 4 is the function which we will first test on the local system, and then we will push it to GCP. So let's see what do we have here. So we have the same main.py, same code, right? The only different thing we have here is we are doing import functions framework, right? So that's the library, that Python library that we have, and we have added that to our requirements.txt, right? So what we will do is we will test this on our local and then we will deploy it to GCP. So let's go to cd demo 4, make sure you are in the correct directory, and let's look at the deployment steps, right? So we did the cd. Okay, now we are going to create a virtual environment, right? So we copy this, paste it, and the virtual environment is created. Let's activate the virtual environment. The command is not right. Let's fix that. Okay. Now the virtual environment is activated. So now we will install all the requirements for this particular project in our virtual environment. So we say pip install -r requirements.txt, and requirements.txt has functions framework library, and then we press enter and it's all good. Now let's run this function on local. So for that, this is the command we will use. We will say functions framework -- target hello. Hello is because main.py has a function named hello. If you name it something else, you can change it here, and we will say debug. We will say run it on port 8080 and accept a host as anything, localhost. Copy that and we paste it here, and you can see that it is gonna start a Flask development server. Should not be worried because this is just to test everything that we need to test. Now that our function is running on local, we can just go to that function by clicking the URL, and you can see it is showing me hello stranger, and you can see it is not on GCP but it is running on our local system, right? We will leave this window open, and then we will do the same test using our requests.http, right? And we will select this request, then we will click on send request, and we can see hello stranger. Next we will pass a name, Ron, and send request, hello Ron. Okay, next we will pass name as Nancy, and we can see send request, hello Nancy. Now it's the same function, right? So there is not much debugging or anything like that is happening here, but think of it as if this was a huge function or something that you were trying to work with a file or something, and you were manipulating tons of data or something like that. That's where your local testing comes handy, right? So now we know that our function works just fine when it is on local, right? So we are confident that if we deploy this function on GCP, it should work, right? So the commands are more or less same, right? We do not need to create the service account because we have already created the service account, and all we now do is we just deploy this function, right? So same command as earlier, and nothing changes, right? So we can safely stop this Flask server, and we paste the command and we press enter, and we wait for the function to get deployed. Now that import that we did in the requirements.txt, or the library that we have mentioned here, it should not affect how our function is gonna behave on once it is deployed on GCP. It should be the same, right? So once it gets deployed, which it is doing right now, so while it is getting deployed, we can just click on it, and we can click on trigger, and we can just grab the URL and do everything else that we need to do. Same thing, we come to requests.http, and these were the local ones, and this is our GCP test. And so paste it here, copy, paste it here, paste it here, right? Looks like the function is deployed. It is, right? So let's go and run this function, right? So before we do that, let's go back here and look at the logs, right? So if you look at the logs are going to be empty right now. I mean, there will be logs, but nothing else, right? Now we will execute this function by going to the URL, or we can just send the test request from here, and we'll say send request, and we receive the same output, hello stranger. Now this is on GCP, right? And we do the same thing with the second one. You get the idea. You will get the same response back saying Ron, and the third one is Nancy. Right, so we know that the output that we received when we did that on local is the same output that we received when we deployed it on GCP, and that is how we can test our function on local before we deploy it to the console, GCP console, right? Now if you look at the logs, let's try to refresh the logs, and we should see all these three functions calls that we just received, right? We did, they're all right here. and that's how you can see the logs, right? In the upcoming demos we are going to actually print stuff in the logs, so you will be able to see it being printed over here. So now you understand how to work with functions framework and how to test your function locally before you deploy it to GCP console, right? So the next one we are going to do is we are going to use the functions framework, but instead of making an HTTP function, we are going to actually execute or trigger the function using pubsub, right, topic or GCS bucket, so let's see how that one works. Okay, so demo 5 is the demo where we are gonna create our functions and trigger those functions using pubsub topics. And before we even deploy those functions to GCP, we are going to test them locally, right? So let's look at the code. The code is pretty simple. It's just gonna print the context event, whatever it receives, and it will say this was triggered by this particular event ID at this particular time, and with this was the resource, right, by this particular service, right, pubsub or GCS bucket or something like that. And the name is stranger, again same thing, right? So if you pass any data, then it will return that particular hello whatever data you pass, or it will just say hey hello stranger, right? Remember that you have to create your function definition this way, because you are going to receive event and context, 2 arguments. If you don't do that, and if you try to create a subscription to your topic, it's gonna fail, right? So let's make sure we do that, right? And again, the only important thing that we are importing is functions framework, so we can test it locally. Everything else is just normal, right? So let's look at our requirements.txt file, and you can see the only thing we have is functions framework. And let's look at our deployment steps, right? So we will cd demo 5, we are already there, and then we will create a virtual environment. Remember, we are doing this so we can test it on local. Then we will activate the virtual environment. Then we will install our functions framework in the virtual environment, right? Now here is the difference. If you look at the previous one, we only said functions framework, target, hello, and debug, port, and host, right? In here we have to specify that we are actually going to invoke this by an event. So the signature type that is expected by this signature type that is expected by this functions framework is supposed to be event type, and because it is event type, we have event and context. Otherwise, if you look at the demo 4 in main.py, we only had request because this was HTTP function, right? So we only had 1 argument. Because this is triggered or event based, we have 2 arguments, event and context, right? So that's the difference. Okay, so we are done with all that. Now here is how you can test this pubsub project on your local, right? So Google has these emulators, right? There is an emulator for pubsub, and there are clear instructions on Google website how to use it. I have technically just copied what they said, and I'm gonna make this work, right? So the first thing we do is export the project ID. This does not have to be the same project ID that you have on Google GCP console. It can be any project ID. So we will just paste this one here. Next, so we were not supposed to paste in here, right? So we are actually supposed to create another terminal, right? So this is all these things that we did here, they were in the main terminal. Now we are going to do everything in another terminal, right? Or we haven't started the function, right? So that's why. So we install the requirements, ignore this export, right? And we will just start our function, right? So now our function is running on local, right? And it is ready to accept the events, the triggers, right? Now we will create another terminal, and this is where we will export project ID, and we will say we will execute this command. This will start the emulator, right? And it's gonna start the emulator on the port number 8085, and it is giving us an error because we have these things here. Okay, that's fixed. Copy, paste. Okay, now our emulator is running. It's throwing us all kinds of errors. I don't know what these errors are. I'm not gonna debug them. Probably they have something to do with Java. This is why I hate Java, right? So I don't know what's going on here, right? So, but it works. You will see it works. And we are gonna add another terminal, right? And make sure the project ID that you use up above for the terminal 2, you are using the same project ID, and we paste it, and we will create some sort of topic, and then we will export a subscription ID, right? And now we are going to push that get the emulator thingy. Now we are gonna clone this repository that Google has provided, which has all kinds of helpers, because I already have did this before doing the demo. That's why it is telling me that this already exists. So I'm not going to, I'm just going to ignore that particular step for now, but you may want to do that. Now we will cd into that, and we will install our requirements.txt in there, and then we are going to start this publisher. And it says topic already exists because I already have that particular topic created when I was doing the debugging, but otherwise it would have created the topic. And then I'm gonna do subscription. It's probably gonna give me the same error saying subscription already exists because I have already done this debugging and everything, right? So now this is the final step, moment of truth. Once we execute this, you will start seeing, we will see that it published these messages. And then if we come back to our main terminal, you can see that this function was triggered by message ID 72, published at this time, hello message number 9, right? So that's what our main.py is telling us. That's what we are doing, right? So this is a very basic way of testing and making sure that even your pub/sub trigger functions are working locally just fine the way they are supposed to, right? Once you're done with all that, we can safely get rid of these terminals, stop the emulator. Okay, and we can also stop the Flask server, right? Now that we know everything is working fine, right, it's time we go and deploy these things on GCP, right? So everything remains the same here, right? We do not need to do pre-deployment steps, but remember, we are creating this for PubSub, right? So we are going to create a topic called my awesome topic, and for that we come to PubSub and we say create topic and we paste it, and we don't want to create any default subscription or anything. We click on create. Okay, a topic is created, but there are no subscriptions. You can see it's all empty here, right? So the next thing we want to do is we want to deploy our cloud function. Now here is what is different in this cloud function. Everything up until this point remains same. So the trigger is topic, so we are gonna say minus trigger minus topic, and then we are gonna provide the topic name, right? And what it will do is when we deploy this function, it will actually create a subscription, and then when we publish a message to this particular topic, it's gonna trigger our cloud function, right? So let's go ahead and do that. Now remember, up until this point we have not changed anything in our service account. Our service account is default and does not have permissions to do anything, and that's how we should think, right? So let's go to cloud functions. Close this window, I'll refresh it, and you can see demo 5 PubSub is being published, being deployed, and the trigger, instead of HTTP, it's my awesome topic. And you will also notice that authentication is empty. It's technically not empty, it is actually, authentication is internal here, because there is there is authentication happening at the subscription level between PubSub and Google Cloud, between PubSub and the cloud function. And you can see that here. Now if we refresh this, scroll down, you can see that we have a subscription created here, right? And this is our cloud functions. So we go to demo 5 PubSub and we go to logs, and you can see it's empty, right? There is no execution or anything, right? So the first thing we want to do is we want to execute something. We want to publish a message. For that we go to message, publish the message saying hello world. Now it's the hello from PubSub, and we say publish, and it's gonna refresh. And you can see function execution started, and hello from PubSub is the message that we published. And you can say this function was triggered by this message ID at this time, and it's from this topic. This is the topic that we subscribe to, right? So this is how we can create a subscription to the topic and invoke the cloud function through the topic message from the topic, right? We can do the same thing with GCS bucket, right? So let's do that, right? So for that, what we will do is we will create a bucket. We are gonna name the bucket a little different because I already have created that bucket. So we will come here and we will say cloud storage, and we are gonna say create a bucket. I'm gonna paste this one. Let's see if it is available. Nope. 1 2 3 4 5 6. Let's make it 1 2 3 4 5 6. Okay, continue. Region US East one is good. Default storage standard. Uniform is good. Doesn't really matter what you choose, what you do right now here. You just make sure you create a bucket, right? And make sure you have the bucket name copied. Once the bucket is created, we will come here and we will deploy the same function, but we will name it differently. We will say demofy cloud storage, and in the trigger we will specify trigger bucket, and we will specify the bucket name here, right? So here we had trigger topic and topic name. Here we have trigger bucket with bucket name, right? Everything else remains the same. So we will take this one, copy this, and we will paste it here. Okay, it's being deployed. So let's go back to cloud functions, and it's being deployed, and it will tell you, right, what is the trigger, so you can easily identify how the particular function is gonna get triggered. So if you go to the previous one, if you go to the previous one and you look at the trigger, it will say trigger is cloud pubsub topic, and retry on failure is no. Be careful with retry on failure, because there are chances that there is a bug in your function, and if you have retry on failure to true, then this function will keep getting executed for about 7 days, right? Something like that. And you may not want to do that, right? You want to control, how the retry or failure will work, right? So you better create a data letter queue or something like that and push it there, right? But that's something you may want to think about before you do that. All right, no worries. So now our function is deployed for the cloud storage. So what we will do is we will push a file to this storage bucket, right? We'll just upload a stupid file, and let's just upload readme.txt, and it says one file is pushed or copied, right? So now if we go to functions, storage, logs, and you can see this is the context, this is the event. The function was triggered by message ID published at this, and this is where it comes from, right? So this is the file that we uploaded, right? So now you have the entire path to the file, and you can do whatever you want to do. You can download that file, and you can read the file, whatever you want, right? We are not gonna do that. You get the idea that now once you have the path, right, so you can download the file and everything, and this is just default stranger, right? So this is how you can create trigger for cloud storage. So in this demo we saw how to create triggers for the PubSub cloud storage. In the next one we are going to see how to work with SQL, right? So stay tuned. Okay, in this demo we are going to see how to work with SQL, Cloud SQL. So we are going to create a MySQL instance, and we will hard code the password, and we will just connect to that MySQL database from our MySQL workbench here. And you can see what do you need to do if you want to do that from your local machine. You want to connect to Cloud SQL instance, how to make that thing work. On top of it, we will also see how to get the secret from it in step 2. All right, so and also you will see how to connect to Cloud SQL instance from from the Cloud Shell, right? So it's gonna be a little involved, right? So but we will break it up in multiple steps, and you will see exactly how to do each of those things, right? So the first thing we need to do is we need to go to demo 6. Demo 6 is our Cloud SQL. Let's look at the code. Code is pretty simple. It says connect to whatever database we ask it to, and then connect to the table and grab the records from that particular select star from students, and then return them, right, in the dictionary. This code is not important, right? It can be anything that you want, right? So just work with me here. What is more important is how do you connect to your Cloud SQL instance from your local machine, and how do you connect to it from Cloud Function, right? They are two separate, they are both different ways, right? So when you are connecting from your local machine, right, if you run this program main.py on your local machine, you just provide host name, username, password, and database name, and you just connect, right? But when you are connecting, and this connection from your local happens over public IP of MySQL instance. But when you are connecting from a service that is running inside your GCP console, right? So it could be Cloud Function, it could be Cloud Run, it could be any of virtual machine or something like that. If you are connecting using one of those services, then you need to connect it using socket, right? So this is how you can establish a Unix socket connection to your Cloud SQL instance. If you try to do it from your local system, it's not gonna work, because this Unix socket file that is being created, it uses private IP, and that's why the open socket on your private, it's gonna open a socket connection on the private IP. So you can't do that from your local machine. You have to be in the same VPC in your GCP project, right? So we will see how that works, right? For that, we will, first thing we want to do is we want to create a SQL database, right? So we just follow the instructions here. Okay, so the instructions for the deployment steps are, we did all this, right? The first thing we want to do is we want to enable Cloud SQL Admin API, right? This will allow our Cloud Function to connect to the Cloud SQL instance, right? So we copy Cloud SQL Admin API, and we come here and we say APIs and services, enable APIs and services. We come here and we say enable. Okay, let's also verify Cloud SQL API is also enabled. It is. Okay, so we are good. Next, we go to the instructions, and what we need to do is we need to modify the IAM role. So if you remember, we created this IAM role in demo 3, and we have not added any permissions to this IAM role. So this IAM role is technically empty, right? So if you go to IAM and admin, you can see it does not exist in the IAM principles here. It only exists as the service account here, right? And this is only thing you have, right? There is nothing here. I'll refresh it one more time. There's nothing here, right? Now what we need to do is we will take this particular command and we will run this command. So what this command does, add I am policy binding to this project's member service account, and this is the service account ID, full ID, and add this particular role to this service account. So it says add this particular role to this service account, which is in this project called GCP Cloud-functions demo 1. That's what this command does. So let's copy this command and put it here and run it here. Let's see what happens. Okay, now you can see it returns, you know, all other tons of stuff, right? So now if we come here and we refresh this IAM, you will see that it actually added this service account here, and it has associated this role called Cloud SQL Client. We can edit that, but that's not what we want to do right now, right? So this is how you can add roles to your service account, right? Through command line. You can of course do it from the UI here, but that's done. And now let's go ahead and create a Cloud SQL database. So we'll click on create instance and we'll say MySQL, and it is saying in order to do this you have to enable compute engine API first. So we will click on enable API. Okay, now the API is enabled, so we will give this instance an ID, and what we will name this instance is test SQL 1. Okay, we will ask it to generate a random password. It says show the password. We'll copy this password. For now we will just hard code the password here, right? Later we are going to see how to put this password in the secrets manager and access it from there, right? So let's do one thing at a time, right? And then we click on the region US East 1. We will say single zone. Let's configure it to be a little cheaper because this is a free demo. Storage SSD is good. We are gonna limit it to 10 gigs. Enable automatic increase is disabled. Now here is the thing, right? So by default it has public IP enabled, right? If this public IP is enabled, we should be able to connect to this instance from our MySQL workbench, right? And then create the schema and tables and all those things, right? But we also want to connect to this particular instance from our cloud function, right? And we do not want to use public IP address for doing that, because when you are deploying this thing in production, you will not have you will not be creating a public IP to your MySQL database, right? Because in production you want to lock things down very tightly, right? So this is what we will do. We will do a production type of deployment, right? I mean, not the real production type of deployment, but in a way that the access is very secure, right? So we click on private IP and then we say which associated network, right? So we just select default, and it says private access connection is required. Click on setup connection, say enable API, and we say use automatically allocated IP range, continue, and just click on create. So remember, the reason we are doing this is because private IP will give us ability to connect to our SQL instance from cloud functions. Public IP will give us the ability to connect to our instance from our local machine. So that's the reason we are doing this. Okay, now that is created. Now what we want to do is we want to connect to this instance from our local machine, so we can create schemas and everything. For that we need to come here and say under public IP we need to say we need to authorize a network, right? So I'm just gonna name these as my home IP address, and what I will do is I will Google my IP address, right? So you just go to the browser window, go to google.com, say what is my IP, and it will show right on top. So you just copy that and you go back and you put it there, and then make sure you put /32 at the end. /32 means only incoming connections from this IP, nothing, no more than this IP, right? So that's like as in one IP. And when this is done, we click on create instance. So it will take some time for this instance to get created. So I'm going to just resume the video once the instance is created. Okay, now our test SQL1 instance is created. So the first thing we want to do is we are going to connect to it from our local machine, right? So I have MySQL Workbench J, so I'm gonna set it up to open connection to this instance, right? So you can see here that we have public IP and private IP, right? So we don't really need to note down private IP address. We need to take the public IP address, copy that, and we come here and we say new MySQL connection, and I'm gonna name these cloud functions demo SQL instance. Host name will be the public IP address, port number is good, username is root, and the password is, remember we have hard coded this password in the application, so put it there and come here and put it in here, say okay, and say test connection, and you can see we successfully made the SQL connection. That is because we authorized our IP address. If we would not have authorized our IP address in the public networks, we would have received an error saying cannot connect, right? So we say okay, and we say okay, and we open it up, and you can see there are no schemas or anything. So let's go to our deployment guides and see what we need to do. Okay, these steps are not in the deployment guide. All right, no worries. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create the schema, right? And the name of the schema is going to be MyDB. So I'll come here and I will right click and say create schema, apply, close. Once the schema is created, I'm gonna create a table called students, because that's the table we are gonna be reading from, right? And it has two columns, student ID, which is int, and its primary key and all that kind of stuff. Next column is name, pretty simple. And that's where I'm gonna click on apply, and close. Now I'm going to insert some records in this particular table. So I'm gonna say my DB, set as a default schema, and just select star from students, and it will tell me I don't have anything in there, right? So we are going to insert a couple of records. Messed up. Table students, alter table, and this is supposed to be auto increment. Apply, close, and now let's one more time. Okay, so one row is inserted, student 2, 2 rows are inserted. Now I'm just gonna say select star from students, and we can see both the records here. Okay, now what we are going to do is we are going to deploy our cloud function to GCP and execute it from the HTTP trigger, and we should be able to get those 2 records back, right? So again, the command is same, right? There is one thing we are doing here. So if you look at main.py, what it is saying is if I'm running in the cloud function, right, then I need to create my connection using this Mysql config for cloud functions, right? If I'm running on local, then just username and password, right? Now how do we know that when to use this Mysql config for cloud functions or for local, right? So for that, what we have done is we have created an environment variable. So if the environment variable called environment is not defined or is local, then use local config. Otherwise use cloud functions config, right? So what we are doing, so how do we provide this environment variable to our function, right? So for that, if you look at this deployment command, you can see here that we are specifying one more parameter here called set and env vars, and we are saying environment equals cloud function. That's the only change we have from every other deployment that we did for our functions, right? So this is how we can create environment variables for our cloud function, right? So let's execute this. We are in demo 6. Paste it, run it. Let's see what happens. Okay, so the function is deployed. We are going to click on it and we are going to look at the logs, right? First, you can see the logs. All it will say is the function is deployed and all those kind of things. We haven't executed the function yet, right? So now let's go to our trigger, and because it's a SQL HTTP trigger, we will just open this in the new tab, and it says error could not handle the request. Okay, so need to figure out why. Oh yeah, I understand why. It's because in our code what we did is we did not change connection name, right? So this connection name is actually combination of project name, region, and the SQL instance ID, right? But you don't have to create this manually. All you do is you come here and you can just grab it from here, from your Cloud SQL, right? So the project name, region, and instance ID. So we did not change that, so let's change that. and this host is a public IP address, right? So if I'm running it on local, then I will put the right IP address, but because I'm not doing it, I'm good with that. So I messed it up here again. I changed the whole thing. Okay, demo 1 US East 1 test SQL 1. I'm gonna save it, and I'm gonna run the same command again and redeploy the function. So I'm glad you got to see the error, because when there is something wrong with your function, and if it's an HTTP request, then you will see these, could not handle the request. And if we go to our logs for our function, it will tell you. So if you go to logs, as you can see here, error in the app, Cloud SQL connection failed, right? So you can see the log statement saying Cloud SQL connection failed. Make sure that your account has access to this cloud instance, SQL instance, and everything. So you get the idea from by looking at the logs, right? But we didn't have to, because I kind of figured it out right away. So let's see if the function is deployed or not. Okay, it's deployed, and now let's refresh this. Okay, still getting the error. Let's look at the logs. This is the problem with live demo. So it looks like, look at this. This is a different demo, right? So I'm sorry about this, guys. I should have been paying a little more attention. Update it in the right file. Now it all looks good. So let's try it. Third time is the charm. Okay, so our function is deployed yet another time, and let's run it one more time. There you go. We get student1 and student2 both, right? And just to make sure that we are actually using the SQL proxy or socket, not proxy, SQL socket. If you go to logs, and you can see running in the cloud-functions environment, right? And if you look at the code, it says running in the cloud-functions environment, grab the config for cloud functions, and we are creating a Unix socket, right? So that's how we can create environment variables, right? So if we go back to the function and we look at the variables, you can see that this is the environment variable that we created, cloud functions, right? Now what we are going to do is we have hard-coded the secret, right? That's not how you really do when you are in production, right? What you do is you want to put this secret in the secrets manager, and then when you deploy your function, you want to grab that secret from the secrets manager, right? So let's do that right away. Okay, so in this demo we are going to see two things. We are going to see how to access secrets from the secret manager, and we are also going to see how to connect to our SQL instance from Cloud Shell, right? So that's gonna be awesome. So let's do the first thing first. Let's connect to our cloud instance from the Cloud Shell, because it may happen that sometimes you don't have MySQL workbench, right? So we start the Cloud Shell by clicking this Cloud Shell button, let it come, right? And then what we do is we follow the instructions that we have here, right? So this is the gcloud command that will connect our Cloud Shell to the SQL instance. Remember, this for this to work, you have to have public IP on your Cloud SQL. And we say authorize, and it will do what it needs to do. And what it is going to do is it is going to whitelist the IP address of this Cloud Shell. Behind the scene there is a server or something, you know, so it's gonna do what it is gonna do. You don't have to worry about it, but what it is going to do is it is going to allow us to execute SQL commands from the Cloud Shell. So it's the same database that we are connecting to. While it is doing this, I will go grab the password. And it is asking me for the password. Put the password in there, and now I have prompt for MySQL, right? So let's see the database and everything that we have. And you can say show databases, show schemas. Technically they are same command. Show databases. This is the database that we created, or schema we created, right? Show schemas, same thing, right? Use MyDB. So this will use MyDB. So it says database changed. Show tables, right? And it will say we have one table, right? And now we can just say select star from students, and you can say we have 2 records. Same way we can insert, right? We can say insert into students name values student 3. And we say again select star from students, and we can see student 3, right? So this way you do not need MySQL Workbench. You can literally just use Cloud Shell and you know work with your database, right? So now that is done. Now we will look at the secrets, right? How do we mount the secrets and expose them as, you know, environment variable, and how do we use it? So for that we will be in demo 7, and we are going to create a secret called db password, and we are going to put our password in there. So let's go to secrets manager. It will ask us to enable the API, and we will say yes, and we will say create secret, and we are going to name it db password, and the secret value is going to be the db password that we have hard coded here. Create secret. Okay, now the secret is created and everything. Let's go through the code and see how do we access this secret. Okay, so we have created the secret. Now what we are going to do is we are going to look at the code. How are we accessing this secret? So we are accessing it from an environment variable called database_password, and you can see instead of hard coding in the demo 7 main.py, we are actually grabbing it from the secrets manager, right, from the environment variable. How do we get this secret mounted in the environment variable? is by putting it in the deployment command here. So you can see this was the last one where we set the environment variable called environment to cloud function. Same way we say set secrets, and we are gonna specify the name of the environment variable where we want to mount the secret, and then we provide the secret name and the version of the secret. Now in order for this to get exposed as the environment variable, we need to modify this service account, and we need to add this role called secret manager secret accessor role to the service account. So this is the command. So I'm gonna take this command, copy it, and run it here. So before I do that, let me show you what it looks right now. So right now it only has Cloud SQL client role, right? This is our service account, right? And when after I execute this command, it will have another role called secret manager secret accessor. So I'm gonna just refresh this. Okay, so secret manager secret accessor IAM role has been assigned to the service account, and now let's go ahead and deploy our function. Demo 7. So let's go to cloud functions. Demo 7. It's still being deployed, but while it is being deployed, if we go here and if we click on variables, you will see this is our environment variable called environment cloud function, and this is our secret database underscore password, and this is the secret, and this is the version, right? So let's give it a second, and it's deployed. So now if we go ahead and trigger this, we will see some good information. Let's see what happens, right? Trigger, run it, and we can see it returned us the correct data, right? And now if we go and look at the logs, you can see that the DB password, I'm printing DB password. You should not do that, because I just wanted to make sure that we understand the DB password is actually coming from the environment variable called DB underscore password, right? So that's the reason I'm printing it, but you do not want to actually print that. No. And that's about it. Now that we know that the password is coming from the environment variable, and we also understand how to connect to our MySQL instance from the Cloud Shell, and how to access secret from the secret manager. And here is where I'm printing the password, right? So you understand how this works. So now we are gonna go to our last demo, and that's the demo where we are gonna understand how to deal with CORS. You will see the error that we will get, and you will also see how do we fix the error. So let's do that. Okay, so let's do the CORS demo, right? So let's look at the code. The code is pretty simple, right? It is still the same code, returns the students, grabs the password from secret manager and everything. So we are building on top of what we have already done so far, right? So that's how we are doing the demos, right? Now here is what happens when we actually use it. So why do we need to deal with CORS, right? So far we have been executing this HTTP trigger by just putting the URL here, right? And we are getting the response back. It works fine, right? Because we are directly accessing the URL. In your real world applications, that's not how you will be doing it. The way you will probably do is you will deploy this cloud function as a microservice, and then you will be actually calling that, cloud function. You will put the cloud function behind a load balancer, and probably create a DNS entry for it, and that's how you will call it, right? And you may put it in a different domain, on a different domain, right? So let's say your website is on www.example.com, right? And because this is gonna be cloud functions will be exposed as an API, you will be creating using it API .example.com / my cloud function, right? Now because there is a domain change, right, because technically now you are on different domains, right, you will have this problem where the codes will come into picture and it will not let you access that, right? So let's reproduce the error and then we see how to fix that, right? So for that, let's do this, right? So there is not much we are doing here. So this is our code, which is same, hello function with environment variables and everything, and we are selecting from the students, right? This we will deploy using the same command, and this will be demo 8, right? So cd / demo 8, and we paste it here. Didn't change the service account name, should be SA. Copy, paste it here, and run. Not gonna work because we did not change the connection name. So let's change the connection name. Copy, paste it, save it. I'm gonna wait for it to finish deploying and then we will redeploy this. Okay, it's deployed, so we know it's not gonna work. So let's redeploy this same function so that it can get the new code with the correct connection name. Refresh it and you will see it's getting deployed again. Now this time we are not going to execute this, we are not gonna execute this cloud function by using a URL. If we do it, it will work fine, right? I'll show you that. But it will not work if we try to access it from a web page. Okay, it's deployed. So let's see if it works when we just call it from here. It works just fine, right? From the URL. Now what I've done is I've created this very basic index.html page. Doesn't really do much. All it does is it calls the cloud function directly, and whatever we return, it just puts it in the div, right? So let's change the URL for the cloud function. Copy that, paste it here, right? And we save it and we go and say show preview, right? And we say open in browser, and we right click and we say inspect, and we go to not console, go to network, right? And we click on the button and you can see we got the course error, right? And if we go to console, you can see that it says that the request has been blocked because there is no course policy defined and no access control allow origin header is present, right? You will encounter this problem if you use it on your website, right? So how do we fix this? It's pretty easy. There is code available on Google which you can actually go and use it, and it's the URL for enabling course documentation, and it has multiple languages, code in multiple languages. So if you are using Python, you do it this way. If you are using Go, Java, Node.js, C#, Ruby, PHP, all those things, right? So that's how you fix it. Now because we are doing Python, we have it used it here, right? So let's see what changes have we made to the code. So let's go to main_fix.py. So what we are doing is we are saying that if the request method is options, then add all these headers and return the headers with 2 or 4. And when we are sending our response back for the get or post or anything else, we add this access control allow origin header to the response headers, right? And what is course, what is options, why do we need to do all this? You can just read about it. It's pretty easy. The browser sends the options request before it can send the get request or post request, to make sure that it can actually access your API, right? So that's what browser does. So what we will do is we will just copy the code that we have in fixed.py, and we will paste it here. Everything remains the same, and we will change the connection name. We will save it, and we will go to our main window, and we will redeploy this. And when we redeploy this, now we are deploying the code which has the fix for the course, right? So once this function is deployed and we click on this button here, you will be able to see the response, and you will see all the students being displayed here. So let's hope it works. Okay, the function is deployed. Again, if we just refresh the URL here, it should work. It did not. Don't know why it did not work. What did we miss? Always do that, right? Redeploy. We do not pay enough attention, or maybe I do not pay enough attention when I'm making changes. That's the thing with live demos, sometimes you have to be patient, but it's good. You're learning, right? That's what matters. As long as we are not wasting our time and we are being productive, we're good. Okay, so the function is deployed. Let's refresh the page here, and we get the students back. Now, moment of truth. Let's see if we get the course error or do we get the students back. Boom, you get the students back because we fixed the error, and we fixed it saying that if there is an options request, return the headers, right? One thing to note here, that even though in the course I'm specifying origin star, you may not want to do that when you are actually doing it in production. You may want to lock it to the domain of yours domain, right? You don't want to allow anybody to just request your API, right? So you want to lock it down saying only allow the request from, let's say, http example.com. I don't think you need to put http, but something like this, right? So that way you only allow requests if they're coming from example.com to your api.example.com. So that is it for the demo. Please let me know what you think about this, and all the code that we have will be on GitHub, so feel free to take it, use it, modify it, do whatever you want to do with it. All the passwords and everything that you see here will be long gone by the time you see it, so don't try to access anything on my account, because it will not exist. But if it does exist and you end up getting your hands on it, feel free to just not do anything, because I'm not spending ton of money trying to save this money. So please be careful in what you do, and happy coding. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you guys, see you guys later. Bye bye.